Hello, everybody. Welcome to part three of my three-part, I don't even know what to call it, mini series rumble on evolution rumble, evolution random rumble with Reid. I don't know what to call this. Anyway, it's part three of something that I've done. So this is to make up for all of the missing room rumbles that have been absent over the last few days. So I have gone and pestered every single creationist I could find. Actually, this one was pestering Amy Newman, who's wonderful and an atheist, and they do nights. But I saw Seascience in there, and Seascience is a person I've blocked. They're pretty toxic. But I thought I would go in there and sort of see what kind of rumble I could rouse. And Seascience, to his credit, was trying so hard, but he was so far out of his depth. In the science, which is kind of ironic given his name is Seascience. You'd think he'd be better equipped to plume the depths of science, but apparently he's not. So Donny had to come in later and save him. And we basically had an impromptu debate on Amy's stream, which I loved and everybody loved, and I'm sure Amy loved. It did get a bit sort of in depth, and sort of Donny doing his usual, we've got no reason to think it wasn't created. Sure, whatever. What I wonder though, is there any way you would come to that conclusion if you didn't start with the biblical account? I think I already know the answer to that one, and it is a question that occurred to me afterwards. I probably should have asked that. Like, if you didn't have the biblical account, is there any way you would look at the genetics and come to the conclusion in a vacuum, in a vacuum of not knowing anything about where it came from? You're not starting with the Bible. Would you come to the conclusion it was created? Of course you wouldn't. You have to have the conclusion up front, and I think that's very, very telling. I think it's very, very interesting that they sort of go, "Oh no, we're not being biased at all." I think a lot more. I would have to sort of say, "Hey, I wanna hold you to those biases. I wanna basically make you say that, yeah, you're starting with the Bible, because a lot of them will just admit it." And I've had another Room Rumble today. That was a great conversation, actually. But yeah, that one's coming next. So I'll spread these out over a few days, and I probably should have said that up front. Actually, I'll spread them over a few days, and yeah, you can get the Room Rumble mini series. Hovind route, I guess, because Hovind runs. But yeah, this was actually interesting because Seascience, for once, he kind of behaved himself. He's got control issues, just like Redefined Living. He has control issues. He can't stop talking when he wants to, which I guess we all do from time to time. But these guys have it bad. And sort of, he can be really obnoxious. So in the chat, he was just he asked about my mother or something, and she's dead. So I just said, hey, she's dead. And he's been thinking, for some reason it gets to me ever since. I don't know why. Like, it doesn't hurt her, it doesn't hurt me. I don't understand, but if for some reason he thinks it's this amazing thing that for some reason I'm supposed to be you know angry about or something, and it's just yeah, dude, she died. I mourned, I dealt with it. But yeah, that's the type of person he is. That's the type of person he is. And it's kind of odd because yeah, it's just it's not like I didn't care for my mother or anything, but it's just weird to try and hurt somebody with something like that. Which just, it really does say more about him than it does about me. And sort of, yeah, so there's that guy, and he more or less did behave himself, but like, I'm just letting you know that the chat was pretty um how would you say it? Unchristian, I guess, to say it gently. But Amy is lovely as usual. I will tag all interlocutors, and yeah, I really hope you enjoy this impromptu debate over on the lovely Amy Newman and James W channel. And of course, I'll link them down below. But yeah, again,
Ranting on
let's
why
get ready to
evolution is
rumble.
not true. Lovely having you on board. I love that hat. And what are your thoughts about the video, the topic, anything to talk about tonight?
Yeah, it's been interesting. I've been in a few discussions about evolution today. What I didn't hear, and I must admit, I probably did come in late, but Seascience didn't really talk about any reason why evolution is not actually true. He just sort of said the Bible. For me, that isn't any kind of sort of evidence against evolution at all. The Bible's just a book. It doesn't actually show anything. While there is a ton of evidence for evolution, I mean, we can point out fossil record, we can point out human endogenous retroviruses, we can point out the geologic column, we can point out like tons of these things have a massive evidence behind it. I think that it was it was one of the people that worked on the Human Genome Project, which is Francis Collins, who said that sort of the DNA evidence alone proves evolution, and he was a theist, quite a devout theist, in fact. So he's. I do agree with Seascience on one thing: like the Bible, whether or not it's true, has no impact on evolution. Evolution will be true regardless of what else happens. And even if evolution wasn't true, it wouldn't matter to us. We don't have a religious belief in it, not like a religious belief in the Bible that it has to be true. If it's not true, we just look for the next answer, the thing that the evidence fits the most. At the moment, the evidence fits evolution, and to an incredible degree. So, but I must admit, I didn't get any reasons why the evolution is not true. Rather, all I sort of heard was reasons to believe the Bible, which a lot of people do believe the Bible, and they don't believe it contradicts evolution. So I don't think those two are necessarily mutually exclusive.
And then right back to you, Seascience, if you would like.
Oh, well said, Mark Reid. Good day, man. What are you wearing on your head there, man?
What are you talking about? This is what I usually wear.
All right, regardless. This was supposed to be the Battle of the Baldies, man. And you showed up wearing a hat. I guess I'm wearing my sunglasses.
Uh-huh.
Looks like a version of Beamsy's hat.
Does this hat make my arguments any less coherent or something? Is that your problem? Does it nullify my arguments?
Listen, Mark, I'm tired. I was just
distracted.
I'm tired. I'm Mark.
No, listen. I was just out back riding my kangaroos and kicking my dingoes around all day. So I just wanted to say one thing. I did not claim that the Bible is evidence against evolution. We only started talking about the Bible because they were inquiring about some of my beliefs surrounding the Bible and my theology. But if you would like to work more from your
and if I could just interrupt real second, I will keep on claiming. I think the reason evolution's even being talked about is because it's a proxy war for religion. This is our Vietnam. The religious are going after evolution.
This is the hill they want to die on.
Yes, because they're trying to get creationism and then intelligent design in the school system, and then we exported it. So, woo! Look out, world. Though I should say we exported it, but you know what? You all exported it to us. Did we? How's that work?
I don't think anybody else is buying it. I mean, we're trying to sell it, but nobody's buying.
But yeah, I think Mark makes a lot of good points. I don't know. What do you think, either one? Mark, Seascience?
Yeah. Marky Marks. Anyway. No, I'm down. Mark, you wanna say something to her?
Oh, sorry, I'm still waiting for. No, go ahead, James. Go for it, mate.
I was just going to say, well, it is worth pointing out the level of skepticism people have for the evolutionary theory, and then when you look at the kind of things that they readily accept from the Bible, it is kind of worth looking at. The dichotomy of how they the level of scrutiny they apply to their belief system, their epistemology.
Well, I think there is an uneven bar when it comes to sort of the burden of proof one places upon their religious books and the burden of proof one places upon scientific, what we call scientific fact that some people just can't accept. Like I'm reminded of the way that sort of flat earthers say that, hey, they cannot accept that the world is a globe, but then propose, a dome and things like that they've never seen and never interacted with as a justification.
No, right.
I think as William Lane Craig sort of said, if you can't get over the bar, then lower the bar. While over on the sort of skeptic end, we say, hey, the bar should be at the same height for all the things you're claiming to believe. You should be making exactly the same jump for one claim as you do for another claim. So it is intellectual inconsistency that we see from people who will readily accept any story regarding their religion, yet things with a mountain of evidence like evolution, they want the bar to be, they literally want to see a cow give birth to an antelope or something, something so ridiculous that we couldn't possibly provide it. And it is this straw manning of evolution. Like usually the requirements that I hear are by people that misunderstand what it is and how it works. So I think straw manning what evolution is also a big problem. That people don't want to understand it, because then it will conflict with the biblical account too much. That's just what I find, though. That is just anecdotal, admittedly.
No,
So-
it's a great observation. But go ahead, Cecil.
Sorry, brother. All right. So you seem to seem to be straw manning some of the young Earth creationists, trying to claim that a cow gave birth to an antelope, or they want to see that happen. That's your claim?
Well, I mean, I've got I can certainly pull up video footage of Clint Hoven, claiming to want to see that kind of stuff. Whether or not that is facetious or not, I don't know. But it is sort of, you've never seen a X give birth to a Y. I don't know why that would be contentious at all.
Okay, I didn't say contentious, but I would say you're kind of straw man or misrepresenting him, because he's first he's saying over many generations, because we've been around a few thousand years now. We've seen many generations of cows, and they've all become cows. And then he goes on to say, before he says anything, he goes on to talk about bacteria, which have a reproduction life of what? It's a lot shorter than humans.
Sure.
So we would expect to see some
That's
kind
a
of
scientific term, a lot shorter than humans, yes.
Well, here's
I know what he means. It's a reproductive cycle. I know what he means. Yeah.
Okay, right. If you would like to know one of the barriers I have for evolution theory, it would be first of all mutation. Okay, because mutation is actually a destructive biological force, and it seems to be that you guys believe it's creative, constructive biological force. It actually builds life forms and doesn't render them incapable of reproducing, by giving them disorders related to reproduction systems, immune systems, to keep them from dying off from diseases. And to me, it just seems like mutation itself is a barrier for evolution. Another thing is the fact that you believe, like we were saying, the bacteria. Okay, we want to see that become a new species, right? But it's the miracle that you believe in, that a microorganism became a macroorganism. That's another barrier, is microorganisms becoming macroorganisms. I'd love to see that happen through a reproductive process that wouldn't be, say, naturally programmed like a gamete, because they're single-celled and they become multicellular organisms. But it's not like a bacteria became one. And that's basically what you're suggesting, is that this LUCA, this last universal common ancestor, a completely hypothetical organism that there's never been any fossils found of. Okay? It's completely imaginary.
I mean, you would never be able, come on. The one organism that lived billions of years ago, you want us to find one fossil?
No, I mean, fossils, they represent a population, so what we would expect to find is at least a chunk of some bacteria, maybe, like a mat.
The very first life forms that emerged.
Oh, those would be the, I don't know, probably, what does the Bible say?
Dirt. God piled up dirt and breathed into it.
Created all the animals from nothing. I don't
know.
Can we find?
But that's what I would go with. I'd go with that.
Well, I'd like to address your arguments because you went through a lot there. You sort of gish galloped along at a fair whack. So,
Sure.
so it's this whole idea of straw
I'll
manning.
talk about the main points.
Well, no,
Two
just
main
a sec. Let me
points.
finish. Let me finish. I'll go through all of your
There we
points.
go.
Let me finish, Seascience. So you said that I
Okay.
straw manned you're sort of creationist, but these are directly creationist arguments that have been given to me. I sort of said that's anecdotal from the creationists that I've talked to. I'm certainly not saying that's your position. However, that is some of the arguments we have had, but you weren't sort of giving why evolution is not true, so I couldn't really address your specific arguments. But it's good that you don't think that a cow came birth to a pine cone or whatever thing Houghton's throwing out there. The whole idea of many generations, it takes more than just a few generations. The changes are so slight that they have to add up over like millions of generations in order to do the fundamental changes that you're talking about. It's a very, very slow process. I'm so glad that you brought up bacteria, though, because we have the E. coli at Lenski Labs, the longest running evolution experiment ever, and they actually mutated to be able to eat citric acid. So that is an example of the mutation that you would expect to see. Now, the pressures being put onto those bacteria aren't significant enough to make them mutate into a bird or something. That isn't what we'd expect to see. But we can, over a short term, in these experiments, show that mutations do happen. And you sort of said they're nothing but destructive. Well, Lenski Labs totally obliterates that because there was that beneficial mutation for those E. coli to be able to metabolize citric acid. So that is untrue. And also, and I've discussed this at length, the way that Sanford said that, these populations would collapse, they would be annihilate. That isn't what we see over our long-term experiments. When we put it into practice, you have Dropsphilia, which is the fruit fly experiments, have been going on many, many years. Their mutations haven't caused them to degenerate to a point where they can't continue. It's not actually happening when we put it into practice. So unfortunately, what we see from our experiments completely debunks the idea that genetic entropy is somehow going to annihilate these populations. Lenski Lab's still going. Dropsphilia's experiments are still going. It's been a long time, a lot of generations. The mutation rates are not destroying them because those mutations that accumulate past a certain point get removed from the gene pool. And I can sort of go into more about how that happens. A new species of bacteria, well, we've seen a sort of new a mutation among algae, the Cladomoni reinhardti, that basically had them turn from a unicellular organism to a multicellular organism. And I can certainly find you the paper on that if you would like. So I think that sort of jump from unicellular to multicellular is a significant change within the population, sort of showing that these beneficial mutations definitely do happen and contribute to a vast change in these organisms. This idea that you want to have LUCA, it's the fact that we've traced it back genetically to LUCA. And as I said before, even the genetic evidence alone would be absolutely, overwhelming in favor of evolution. The fact that we can trace this mitochondrial DNA back to a common female ancestor, even although there were other female Homo sapiens around at the time, shows that we definitely did evolve to this point. And the sort of things like, if you want to go into genetics, I'd love to go into human endogenous retroviruses, which show that with the 205 retroviruses that are shared between humans and chimpanzees, there is no possible way that they could have gotten there. Those viruses could have gotten there unless we shared a common ancestor.
Are you done? Are you good?
Yeah, I'm
Talk
fantastic.
about Gish
Thank
Gallop.
you. Well, they were all your points.
What was that? I got
He was
9
just addressing
points
all
for-
the points.
I was
He
just addressing your
what
points.
you brought up.
Look,
No,
Seascience,
let me just.
if you want to
point out real
discuss
quick.
one point at a time, bring up one point at a time. If you bring up many, I will
We'll
address
go
many.
over one point at a time.
Sure.
Before your Gish Gallop, you talked about how you
Gish
weren't
Gallop.
misrepresenting. Have people actually come on and tell you that pine cones became whatever and
They
whatever.
always
Well, that's-
accuse you of what they're
It's
doing.
tough. It's tough when you're talking in front of people and they're probably not explaining themselves completely before you interrupt them. I mean, who knows? You know what's going on. But I believe what they mean is they believe that pine cones and cows have a common ancestor, or you believe that.
Yeah.
So like somewhere along the history of time, there was a common ancestor of pine cones and cows. right? That's what you believe, right?
Is that a question for me?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, yeah.
That's what you believe, right, Mark?
So the genetic evidence does suggest that every single living organism came from a single genetic heritage. So the way that we know this is through stuff like the mutation rates, the endogenous retroviruses that we find markers in.
Are the reasons you believe that, like ERVs, genetic markers, a lot of the things you mentioned are the reasons that you believe that. So let's go over some of the points you talked about. First of all, you said that happens, you know, the change from speciation actually happens like from cow to antelope. If you would believe that ever happened, I don't know why you believe that would happen. But cow to antelope, you believe that happened very slowly over many generations, right? But then you also believe sometimes like mutation must happen fast because you believe that chimpanzees changed the humans in 3 million years, right?
Okay, so I never said that speciation happened from cow to antelope. What I said specifically that isn't something that we said that would happen. So you've gotten me completely wrong and are misrepresenting me there. What I basically said, I'll just finish. I'll just address it. What I actually said was that cows and antelopes had a common ancestor, just like a lot of things had a common ancestor. Chimpanzees and humans had a common ancestor, and we can tell that by human endogenous retroviruses. That 205 of them are shared between us and chimpanzees, which is an incredible amount. And as we get further away from, to gorilla, to orangutan, we have less of these endogenous retroviruses shared, and the genetic code becomes less similar. It does really point to a nested hierarchy of trees.
Yeah, I know that's what you believe, but the truth is, genetics are similar throughout the entire animal kingdom, And I know that you believe, hey, that means they all had a common ancestor. But the view of the creationists is that means that they had a common creator or a common programmer, if you would. But here, what I want to point out about your first point, that it takes multiple generations to move or speciate from a cow to an antelope or a whale, because I believe that evolutionist theory or the narrative is that a land animal, much like a cow that produced milk, turned into a whale over millions and millions of years. Well, they believe that took millions and millions. Hang on. They believe that took millions and millions of years, but they believe that a chimpanzee turned into a human in 3. What a miracle that chromosome 2 fusion must have been that made that change you believe in. I don't believe in that change, by the way. I think that people were made with that fusion.
No, I get that. I get that. I don't know why a god would design things like that. It seems very antithetical to sort of doing different designers to reuse something like that, like what appears to be a mistake and a fusion in order to sort of show that things are different. I never said that a cow turned into an antelope. I never said a cow turned into a whale. So I don't know why you keep saying that, because that's never what I said. It's basically that an ancestor of a cow turned into both a cow and an antelope, or a cow and a whale. Where they diverge from the points, you've got to go back for, and as I've kept saying, we have a lot of genetic evidence to suggest that is the case. Whales and cows do have endogenous retroviruses that are on exactly the same part of the genome and exactly the same virus, so they do share these things.
No,
well, I would have to look it up, but I know that there's definitely one shared by fish and humans. So I would be able to grab that for you.
You assume that there are ERVs,
and I'll let you guys go back and forth one more time, and then I'm just going to get Ember in, and we'll just keep on going.
No, lean forward to your mic. It makes you more convincing. Go for it. So the whole idea that you make this claim that it was created and designed individually, I think that's a claim that you really need to back up, because you're throwing that out as a knowledge claim that this has happened. So what evidence do you have that these things were designed separately as sort of individual products, if you will? What evidence do you have of that?
Back away from the whale thing. I mean, you really do believe that a cow-like creature became a whale, and it seems like you actually believe a cow became a whale, like our bovine that we have now. When in the evolution narrative, it's actually a cow-like creature, not a cow. But here's my point. You believe that evolution happens fast and sometimes apparently not at all for hundreds of millions of years. If that's true, how am I supposed to know if it even happens?
Yeah, so
if you believe it happens fast, slow I mean by multiple generations, because you're again misrepresenting the young Earth creationist view, because they go and explain to you that they even understand that you believe it takes multiple generations for speciation to occur. But what they're asking is for you to give a little evidence of speciation that actually happens in the animal kingdom.
I gave multiple.
However,
in the animal kingdom,
when
where you would expect to see it, a bunch of animals. Sorry.
no. When I'm good with that question, but when Mark responds, Mark, please tell me when you're done, and then no one else respond, just so I can get Ember in to join us.
Sure, no problem at all. Now I'll share my screen, and this is just an artist representation, but this is sort of what they sort of estimate the ancestor of cows and whales look like, a very early mammal that is related to both and evolved into all kinds of other things as well. So yeah, it doesn't look much like a whale, doesn't look much like a cow. Now, you're strawmanning my position again, because apparently, like, leaning forward to your mic. Can we have sort of one person talk at a time, or have you got no self-control? You've got no self-control, no discipline.
No, wait, Mark.
No, you have no discipline. You have no discipline. I never said that a cow turned into an antelope or a cow turned into whales. Everybody heard me specifically say that, yet you bring it up again, which is really weird. It's like you don't listen. So you're strawmanning my position again. What I said is there was an ancestor of both the cow and the whale. One kept on land, one went into the water. As James pointed out, cows still give milk. So and we call female whales cows. They are cows. That's what we call them, because they do give milk and they did share a common ancestor. And we have a ton of genetic information that shows the same. I mean, I can look up the ERVs that are shared by cows and whales, but you will have to acknowledge that and say, hey, I was wrong.
Right.
No discipline.
Yeah, it's cows.
No discipline.
Baby whales are called cows.
Yeah, I'm done, Amy. Mark? You can bring in Ember.
Fantastic. And with that, we are going to bring in Ember.
But before Ember speaks, can I just talk about his supposed ERVs between whales and cows that he wanted to talk about? He did mention that, right? Didn't you say ERVs between whales?
We'll have plenty of time to talk about ERVs.
Yeah. I mean, the only ERVs I know that have been identified are between, animals that evolutionists think matter.
You mean the ERV responsible for placental development?
On to burning man.
Are you aware that the whale has a placenta?
Good chat, Mark. How about that Pakicetus that you brought up? The animal you see in front of you is a Pakicetus. He believes that animal changed into a whale over hundreds of millions of years. Yeah. Oh, not even that. I think it was like tens of millions of years.
Yeah, just a few million years.
And then it turned into that.
But they believe that.
Yeah, they can move pretty quick sometimes.
Yeah. But before, you were conflating species. We have lots of examples of speciation. We can show you that all day long. It's just that you guys shift the goalposts.
See, I feel
you have more examples of speciation.
But Seascience
than the Australopithecus,
and I will let you.
That's
I'll
not
let
an
you
argument,
say something before I hand it over to Ember. But this is why I keep on saying the two different models are what Mark just said to you, and God did it. That's why I keep on going back to the alternative model, because you're like, it happened over this many millions or billions of years, but the alternative is it happened instantaneously, correct?
Well, not necessarily instantaneously, but however God accomplished the deed.
But we can show you speciation. It's just you guys shift the goalpost, and then you want to see things go from an amoeba to a whale.
Oh, I don't want to see. I want to see a single speciation event in the animal kingdom that we've witnessed. Just one example in the animal kingdom where an animal has changed into a new species and can no longer reproduce.
Perfect example.
I have a question for you, Seascience. Whales placental. Are whales placental?
Yeah, whales are considered mammals. They give milk. We all know that.
Well, not all mammals are placental. There's also kangaroos. They're not placental mammals. They're marsupials. Same with
right. They're
Right. So
Platypus lays eggs, right?
whales are placental, which means that the system responsible for that placenta was actually an endogenous retrovirus. They share it with humans and cows.
It's
Can
part
you
of
imagine
the,
being the first to catch that virus? Like, what the hell is going on in my uterus?
Also, I'm
Yeah.
not the first person to make this joke, but because the platypus has eggs and milk, it can make its own custard.
And no stomach. The platypus has no stomach. Did you know that? I didn't know
Really?
that.
Yeah, we found
Did
that
not
out
know that.
recently
Insane.
on whose
The
stream was
platypus
it? Was
has
it
no
one of
stomach.
Doc's streams?
So much for the like. Oh, they're like cars and they've got the same design. Well, looks like God forgot the gas tank on one of them because the platypus has no stomach.
That's
What does it just go straight to the intestines, or how does it?
Yeah.
It's got like a pseudo gizzard kind of thing.
Yeah.
Okay.
God forgot the gas
But-
it
tank.
does. The platypus is like evolutionist kryptonite.
Oh,
Not at all.
what?
Just because it
has
has
no
no
answer.
Because it's catastrophic to the creationist model, so we have to project it
Really?
onto you evolutionists and make it your problem.
Well, not really. It's a great thing for creationists because
It proves that
it
God
has
gets
no
drunk.
ancestry. Fossil ancestry is a platypus.
What?
It's a bigger platypus.
Milk
It's
and
fossil ancestry.
just like
What?
us,
Yeah,
except
no,
it
I
has
know.
a beak.
No,
know a lot
it's
about
related
fossils
to
than
the
me.
other extant echinoderm. It's related to God, what is it?
Your imagination. Yeah.
Pouch
So basically,
marsupials.
No. It's the echidna. It's related to the echidna.
Well,
Gotcha.
another good thing about platypus for creationists is it has a duckbill-like structure.
Yeah, but
Although
it's
it's
not the
made out of
same as a
different
duckbill.
material,
Yeah, different material.
Right,
So
made out
Ray
of different
Comfort
material.
runs
Squids
around
have beaks,
asking
so
for a
not
crocoduck
the same.
for all these years, and then here's a critter that's clearly a mammal but also has duck characteristics, and that's a problem for evolution?
It absolutely is because between animals in the animal
And
kingdom.
the M word you were
Between
looking
animals,
for.
there's like-
Correction, it's monotrems or
Monotremes,
the
yeah. I'm so sorry, I forgot. Yeah.
animals
Oh,
are not believed to be closely related like a duck and a platypus. They're not believed to be closely related,
Of course not.
but yet they have the same exact appearing structure.
It's
on
not
their
the same
face.
exact thing.
Even
It's
though it's
made out
made
of
out of
something
different
different. Yes,
materials.
that's right. It's called
It's
parallel
made out of different
evolution.
materials 3 times. Mark, you're making my point.
Yeah,
You're
no,
making my
it's
point
like
for me.
it's
It's
like the octopus
But it's
eyeball
like structure.
evolved separately than the human eyeball, and we know this because they use a different design structure. In fact, the octopus eyeball
Would you believe there-
is superior because
Bill?
it doesn't have the blind spot that we do. So we know that those things, one did not evolve from the other. Like it wasn't like we have a lineage shared with the octopus evolution. It's like bat wings and bird wings, right? They evolved to do the same job, so they are similar, but they're not the same. And the same is true with the platypus. It has a similar bill than a duck, but it is not the same. There's some very, very strong differences between them, but they evolved to do the same job, and that's why they are similar.
Seascience, you have 15 seconds to finish. I feel bad I keep on giving you short times, but we have to get Ember in. But I'll give you all the time after
Ember is
Ember
in.
does his intro.
All right.
He's
All right.
true, but I have to give him his intro.
Okay,
Well,
sorry.
I'm going to attack
Oh no,
his
you're
ERV
fine.
argument there the most because he believes that ERVs are from common ancestry when there could be a different reason. It could be from a like environment, like virus infections. If you really believe that virus infections led to those abilities, then you really believe that a virus infecting a host is what caused those changes. That's hilarious. Let's talk about that after Ember.
And all right, Amber, whatever you'd like to say as an intro, and then once you're done, we are going to go for about 20, 30 more minutes of open mic, and then we're going to go to outros, and then we are heading out because we have been skeptic and ranting on why evolution is not true. But Amber, anything very dedicated you want to say about anything we talked about tonight?
Okay, so it's been a very evolution-heavy night, and I've been getting a lot of info from the creation side, a lot of actual science from the science side, and I'm finding myself wanting to try to reconcile these two crazy positions. So I'm sitting here thinking, what if we understand that correlation does not equal causation? So what if evolution is just an illusion? What we see as changes from generation to generation, accumulating and accumulating, is the process by which the intelligent designer of your choice is creating new life forms. Because this guy's supposed to be outside of time, right? So, from his perspective, every new creature is in fact poofed into existence instantaneously.
What do you think, Seascience?
Speechless.
Yeah, that sounds like a creationist philosophy right there. Is that what you hold, or is that just a hypothetical philosophy for someone to hold?
Oh yeah,
like a stepping stone
I'm
to becoming
speculating.
Yeah.
I'm speculating.
Well,
I'm
yeah,
trying
yeah,
to
then
resolve
then you'll get
the
no-
difference. Harmonize the
Okay,
ideas, I suppose.
Yeah, then if you're looking for confirmation that a creationist like me would believe that, then no, you'll get no confirmation of that from me.
Oh, curses. I'll have to
We're
try
not gonna
harder.
make
Yeah, I know. I mean,
Yeah.
Good shot, though.
The thing is there's a lot of barriers for evolution, and that's why evolution is not true. One that we sort of covered was mutation is a destructive biological force, according to science.
But if
All
everything is
observable.
controlled by an all-powerful God, and it all does the actualizing his plan, then it shouldn't be possible for mutations to be destructive, because that's how he's going about creating new creatures. So the fact that some mutations are destructive kind of falsifies the God hypothesis, just right there.
Yeah, and that's basically it would for the biologos people, and that's why I don't believe in biologos or evolution at all. I don't believe the biologos philosophy that God controls evolution to create the many forms.
Well, I mean, what's the alternative? That God doesn't control evolution? Then whence come
I
this new
appreciate that you're
creatures?
trying to provide like a stepping stone for people like to come to your belief system. Like that's a good way, and to like sort of weave a web of uncertainty or just like how it's called. But like where you're going is a good way to teach people. Like if you're really trying to reach people. Like for me, I try to make a stepping stone for atheists. Hey, maybe there is a creator. It doesn't have to be this particular one. So I'm doing the same thing. It's yeah.
Yeah, sure. There's a lot of believers who also subscribe to evolution.
Mm.
They just perceive it as that's the way God chose to do things, whatever their God of choice happens to be.
Yeah, there's a lot of Christians that prescribe to evolution. That's true. But there's also Bible-believing creationists that don't. And that's the majority of Christians are ones that believe the Bible. Because a belief in
I
the
don't
Bible...
think that's true.
Okay, yeah, you can deny it. But a belief in the Bible doesn't allow belief in evolution, at least human evolution.
I don't
Well,
think that's
seems to.
true either.
Yeah, it seems to.
Well, the Bible describes, at least the book of Genesis, the Hebrew Bible describes, not to get into that, but since you brought it up, we're going to go into biologos. It describes man being created in full form, a walking man that's capable of speech. So the Bible doesn't allow belief in evolution, at least human evolution. I mean,
Well,
if you want to go and be like, all the other animals evolved before man, and we're going to put some
say it's a
time there.
metaphor.
it's a metaphor, right? So they think it's the same as like the talking donkey. Do you think that there was a talking donkey in the Bible?
Yeah, see, now you're going to attack the Bible, but again, you guys
Well,
are bringing
no.
up the Bible when what we're here to talk
You
about
brought up the Bible.
You just said
why
you quoted the
evolution is
Bible.
not true.
You just brought up the Bible.
So this, oh, what?
You brought up the
Ken
Bible.
Hovind.
Bible as
This is
far
like
as
Ken Hovind, who
biologos
reads from the
and
Bible during the
creation
debate,
by
then
a
says,
Hebrew
"What? We're
God,
talking
yes.
about the Bible. I don't
So,
want to talk about.
see however
I'm not
you
here to
want,
talk
though,
about the
but
Bible."
we could talk about why evolution is not true if you'd like, because there are barriers
Well,
for
then
evolution
leave
which
out
we
the
have to deal
Bible.
with, or at least rational.
The Bible has no influence on whether
Yeah,
the
like-
evolution is true, and your preferences, like, oh, I don't want this to be. It's got nothing to do whether it's true or not. It's just your wishful thinking. Like, show us some
So let
evidence that
me
it's not
ask,
true.
Seascience, what
Yes,
is your biggest roadblock to believing that evolution is true? That thinking that evolution is not true. What's your biggest stumbling block?
The biggest run right now for me is the nature of mutation.
The
Just flat
nature
out.
of mutation.
Yeah. It's because mutation is the main biological force that the theory of evolution relies on to create the many forms of animals. But it only seems to be a destructive force, one that creates disorders,
That's
one
not
that
true.
creates new kinds of cancers.
That's not true.
SFT is here, yeah.
Okay. I mean, FST can join.
I
if you
got
want.
distracted by everyone just going, well,
What is
Look,
up,
sorry.
Donny started it, right? We didn't start it.
It's true. We're all
We
just
didn't start the
reacting like
fire.
programmed robots.
Yeah, absolutely. When somebody says something, we just ape them. We're really just yeah.
But that's true. I will say, upcoming debate that maybe I think we're setting that up. The double decker versus Kent.
James
But,
W.
okay,
Is that
I'm
you?
sorry, Mark.
Is that you, James?
It is me.
Oh, awesome,
James B.
awesome.
Amy and James. Yeah. Me and Amy versus Kent. It's coming up.
Yeah, Donny, I've been in 8 hours. I'm just getting warmed up, mate. Okay, so the whole idea of sort of bringing up the Bible as it cannot be true because of the
I'm
Bible,
not
and
drunk
sort of
yet.
these.
I'm just getting started.
Yeah, I'm just getting started. Just the whole idea is that we want to look at the evidence, not just sort of go to the Bible and say, hey, because the Bible says it can't be true, then it can't be true. I think I'll like sort of voice back to Amy talking about what sort of adheres to reality or not, like whether it adheres to reality. And just the fact is that saying there's no beneficial mutations just is not true. I brought up a couple Seascience. I don't know why you sort of said to brush them off. I brought up Lenski Labs. I brought up the Chlamydius reinhardti. I brought up the algae is what I brought up, and that were just a couple of them. I could go into more if you would like. Trichomia is definitely a beneficial mutation for women, because that's the only people that get them. There's a lot of these sort of beneficial mutations. HIV what am I thinking of? It's not immunity, but it's sort of a resistance. Yeah, is definitely a mutation that helps out. And sort of you brought up ERVs, and it could have just come into the sort of could come into the cell anywhere. That can't happen. And the reason why is because when you have a cell with sort of DNA inside of it, and then you get a retrovirus that inserts its own DNA, it will make a very specific place on the genome, and it will use transcriptase and integrase, the integrase to insert itself and the transcriptase to transcribe itself, its own DNA into that chain. Now, the chances of that happening on the same cell in the same place are so ridiculously improbable to be almost impossible. And don't forget.
Well, that sounds like an argument from incredulity.
Well, it's the fact that you have it like sort of the placental development one, right? For instance, all mammals have that ERV there. All of them do. And
it's one of the things that makes a mammal, which
correct.
I would argue is further evidence that that mutations, including and especially ERVs, are software packages, downloads from the intelligent designer. Like, hey, here's your upgrade. Now you have placentas.
Well, that's weird that he makes it look like a virus and has like the ENV gag pole structure as well as the long terminal repeats on the other end, on the ends, which is created by integrase making the cuts in the DNA to insert itself. So
almost like it was designed that way.
Well, it's a weird design to make it look exactly like, when we look at science, we don't go, hey, well, let's see if we can find any conceivable reason why this would look like a retrovirus. And we have such a swath of evidence of the type of damage that retrovirus leaves and the structure when it inserts itself into DNA. So I don't know why we would say, hey, it was a magic man, when the simpler explanation is just it was an ERV. I don't know why we would say that. You're more than welcome, Donny. I'm happy at round 2, mate. More than happy.
Dun, 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 dun.
Look, I gotta admit, I got a soft spot for Donny. I like Donny. I can't help myself. I disagree with him. I still like him.
So much love to SFT.
Yeah, absolutely.
He's a fair moderator.
Well, watch out.
He's a good sport.
This time I have a fancy hat, Donny. Don't forget about that. Don't underestimate the hat. Yeah, absolutely.
He's came on here and got grilled by Peter, and he took it like a good sport.
Who?
Like
Donny?
ERVs
Yeah, Peter can grill. He's a grill master. Sorry, Ember, go for it.
Oh, it's all good. I was just saying that hats like ERVs are software upgrades.
A software upgrade for my head? Okay.
Yeah. It gives you more room for your brain to stretch out, like leg room for a brain. Yeah.
Oh, she could go all night.
I always say, generally speaking,
It's 4 a.m. where I am. I'm just winging it.
Nice.
See, if anyone, we're probably gonna be going out in 20 minutes. But if a creationist joins, we'll probably go on for a few more hours, a few more days. How much time do you have,
If it's
James?
the preacher, we'll be here. We may be here a week.
Week or two, exactly.
Woof. Perry, wow.
A week of listening to Perry. Yeah.
Ooh, he's going to be on all week.
Well, it does take a minute to finish the sermon properly,
Okay.
And reading Bible verses to us too, backwards.
Backwards.
Welcome to the party, Caterpillar.
It's the only way to get to the Bible code.
Oh,
exactly.
Mark, are you ready? Are you ready? I've got a whole page here.
I've never been more ready in my life. Have you got the arguments from Donny?
Okay, Mark is ready.
Allow me to steel man your argument, Mark.
Okay.
First of all, you believe that I am claiming a straw man, which is that the Bible proves the theory of evolution isn't true. I never claimed that once. So I'm trying to steer clear of the Bible. Dude brought up biologos. Dude brought up religion. I'm sticking to the science, so let's stick to the science. You believe ERVs proves that humans are related to chimps and other animals are related to other animals, and you don't believe that the ERVs are front-loaded or placed there in the beginning as basically software, or that the ERV section of the genome is basically an operating system for the genome, something that commands the rest of the genome, and that it's, that these sites are actually interdependent systems. And the reason all mammals have them is possibly because the same image was used to create all animal forms. You believe that the ERV preferences, the ERVs are coming in through virus infections, okay? You believe that the only way the two animals can have it in the same exact site in an animal genome, okay, is because they have a common ancestry, and I'm here to tell you that is not the case. Some of the reasons for the preference sites of ERVs is actually the way that, and the nature of a virus and how it infects a host. Because a virus has to match the DNA of the genome of the animal that its host is, that it infects. That's why some viruses can't infect other animals, because they don't possess the DNA gene that it can attach to. Now, the reason that these preference sites exist, okay, and where they're at is because of the nature of the virus. It will actually affect that part of the genome on a mammal because it's a mammal. That's why cats, dogs, and humans can all catch some of the same viruses, and you have interspecies viruses. Another reason for these genetic markers, such as genes that are common between animals, beyond ERVs, you have genetic markers that are actually genes that match between animals. They're actually pretty short genes in the most case. But here again, you have an instance where the same image is used to create many forms. Okay, so you'd expect to see that. You would expect to see that all the Legos, the same Legos were used to create all the same forms if the same creator was making these forms, basically. You don't believe... All right. So, yeah, if you don't believe that ERVs are front-loaded, then I challenge you, how could such interdependent systems like ERV operating systems and genomes exist? That's my question to you.
Right.
The creator didn't install them.
Yeah. Sure. Okay. So you basically said that I was a straw manning you. I'm not sure how. I'm not saying like you're the one that brought the Bible up.
Straw manning the theory.
Yeah.
Have some
control over yourself. Have some control over yourself. So you were the one that brought up the Bible. I was simply addressing what you said about it. So I'm not sure why you would sort of say that. ERVs are front-loaded an operating system. We're not a computer system. I don't know why you would sort of say that. But again, I've already addressed that, saying that even the long-term and repeats are not part of the code, if you will. They are part of the damage done by the insertion of that genetic sequence into the DNA of the host. So that is not part of the sequence, yet they are still there. All mammals have them, yes. There's even ones that we share with fish, strangely enough. You're sort of saying how it infects the host that hatches to match. It is true that viruses do go for certain organisms because that's the ones that they infect. However, most of them do have a broad spectrum that they can infect. And even if that were true, it would still affect different animals in different places because it doesn't choose what section of the genome as it's bundled inside the cell it goes for. What it does is it just goes for the optimal place, the closest place to the edge. So you will narrow the amount that it inserts itself in because it will only insert around the outside, but that's still a massive area. All of that has been accounted for when we say that it could insert anywhere. Yes, there are limited places it can be, but those limited places are still in the thousands or even up to hundreds of thousands. It's not limited like, it just goes for this specific part of the genome. Completely and utterly incorrect. It just selects this closest insertion point anywhere on the outside of that cell, and that's how it does it. And sort of all of that's accommodated by the ridiculous percentage of this. And don't forget that these ERVs, we have seen them insert themselves time and time again. HIV is a retrovirus. We see it insert into people, and we have seen that virus mutate so it actually prevents disease and gives resistance to HIV. So we have seen these things turn beneficial, and that answers your question, how can independent systems have them? Because not all mammals are placental mammals. There are differences because marsupials split before that placental change occurred. So the marsupials, they use a pouch system. They're different. And the metronomes, and thank you for grabbing that sort of family name, Amy, they split before even then. So they are egg-laying, which means that they never got that endogenous retrovirus that caused mammals to be mammals. So the platypus still lays eggs. And that's why it explains it perfectly. But you cannot explain why in 205 separate locations in the chimpanzee and human, that virus has inserted to exactly the same place in the genome when it could have been any place among thousands and thousands and thousands.
It occurs to me that for that match
that gives you
to be
for
the way it is, it would
hang on, Amber. Let me just talk to this guy because he's really trying to talk at me. Listen, Mark Reid.
Yeah.
ERVs, if you really don't believe that they're front-loaded, like the majority of... I just let you talk for like 5 minutes. If you really don't believe that ERVs are front-loaded, they're not part of an independent operating system that affects the genome, I challenge you to read a paper about preference sites that I can leave in the chat right now, and it tells you the reason that ERVs choose preference sites. Do you know how many like ERVs there are between humans and chimps?
205. I've said it.
205.
I've said it like multiple times.
What? How many? No, how many ERV sections, like actually gene code sections, are like between humans and chimps? Actual individual sections of gene code are alike that are ERV sections. How many are there? Is there more than a dozen?
205. Yeah, I keep saying it.
Yeah, there's 205 out of hundreds, out of tens of thousands of ERV sites. Now, why are there so few like ERVs between chimps and humans? Ember, you can open up anytime you want to. That's all I wanted to say to this, man. So you can see the other side. Sure. Why are there so few ERV likenesses between chimps and humans, dude? If we actually evolved in the last 3 million years, how come there's only a handful of them in tens of thousands of ERVs? Tell me.
Yeah, sure. Because mutation happens, right? And that the chances, because the ERV has to be fixed and endogenized, so it has to be in every cell, the mutation has to happen in the germline. So it has to happen in the sperm or the egg. So you're talking not of an individual being infected, you're talking about an egg or a sperm being infected. So it has to happen in that germline. And there's a much less chance of that happening in a germline. It just doesn't happen a lot.
Yeah, the only mutations that are handed down, or horizontally even, okay, are ones that happen to the gamete, dude. Because they're the only genes that are passed. So yeah, everyone knows that. Why don't you tell me something I don't know? Why don't you tell me why there are so few ERV sites between chimps and humans?
Yes, but I'm not talking about a retrovirus like HIV, a retrovirus infecting one of your cells. What I'm talking about is a retrovirus infecting, not mutations, infecting a sperm on egg, which is the germ line.
Yeah, like I said, a mutation that happens to the gamete, okay,
I'm not talking about mutations,
is the only mutation that can be handed on to new generations because okay, those are the two cells that are, combining.
But I'm not talking about mutations.
Tell me why there are so few ERV likenesses between chimps and humans.
Okay.
You believe that the reason that we're related is because there's a handful. Why are there so few?
Yeah, I'll try to make this simpler. The reason why the ERV sequence or the endogenized retroviral sequence is in every single cell of your body is because the only time that can happen is when meiosis, the cell division, when you are like originally born, copies that infection to every single cell in your body. So that means that it was the germline that was infected. The egg or the sperm was infected by a virus. So it's not the same as just somebody getting a HIV and their cells becoming infected. Because then what happens is they're in different... Hang on, let me finish. Then they would be in different parts of their cells all over their body. And we can tell that's happening because they do attack random. They do have preferential sites, but they attack random places. So that's what we find. So in the case of endogenous retroviruses, we know that that virus infected the germline, and that is a very rare occurrence.
Yeah, so why do chimps and humans share so few if you really believe that they're related in the past?
And I will say before you answer that, Mark, and you can answer it again if you want, but we got
no answer.
Someone else decides to join, anyone is welcome to.
Yeah, I just told you.
We are probably going to be wrapping up unless it gets any spicier. This has been Skeptic and Ranting, why evolution is not true. It has actually been a fun back and forth, but yeah, time to get in your last questions or answers.
And
the point is that we shouldn't, if we are created separately, the humans and the chimps shouldn't share one, much less 205. It should be that viral mutation is in a different place in our development, or it's a different virus in our development that it is in chimp development, because somewhere along the line, a chimp germline, a sperm or an egg, would have had to be infected by, let's call it the same virus, by some freak of nature. The chances of them happening to infect the same area at the same point is almost impossible. And then you've got to repeat that 205 times with that virus infecting exactly the same place. Now, sort of creationists want to say, oh, well, God front-loaded it like that when there is literally zero evidence for that. We've seen infections happen in germlines. We see that the organism has that GAG ENV pole structure. I don't see any reason to invoke any kind of magic to put it there. it's just wishful thinking and trying to wave away the similarities between endogenous retroviruses in us and chimpanzees. Like a massive portion of your genome is endogenous retrovirus, and it's not just chimpanzees. We share ones with other mammals, with fish, with they're just spread out everywhere. Oh, so Evolution News is not actually an evolution site, by the way. That's actually a creationist site that has been doled up. So everyone's aware of this. It's Evolution News and Science Today. It's actually a creationist site that tries to debunk it. So I'll go straight to the paper, which will be great. One relevant study. Here we go. Let's go directly to the paper. Yeah, no. Seascience, Evolution News and Science Today is not a real journal. It's not. It's
You can kind of tell by the trending on the side.
Yeah.
Joe Rogan and Stephen Meyer, Big Bang Refuted, William Shatner and Our Privileged Planet.
Mm-hmm.
It's wow, yeah. It's kind of ridiculous looking.
Theistic evolution.
So you disagree with the information, right? Not with who was liking it. I mean, I know who likes the information, but you would disagree with the information there. Why the ERVs might have preferences, but why again? Why are there so few? Why only a handful of ERVs, like sections between chimps and humans?
I've already told you twice.
I mean, I know
that
mutation only gets passed on if it happens to the gamete. But here's the thing. Here's the thing, dude. The only mutation that's beneficial that gets passed on happens to the gamete too. Like, so evolution depends on mutations that happen within the gamete. So how rare is it?
Of course it does, but like there's a big difference between handing down your genome and mutation happening in the copying of a gamete than a virus infecting the specific cell that is the sperm or the egg. Yeah. What are you talking about?
It all depends on it. It's because of the nature of viral infection. It's because of how viruses act within the DNA of the genome, of an animal, man.
So how do they act?
Of a plant. Even plants can get viruses too.
Yeah,
they have
how
DNA.
do they act?
The reason that is because there's viruses that contain viruses. What they are is they're little sections of RNA or DNA floating around. Okay. And when they get onto you, they infect your genome, and they can only attach where they match your DNA or RNA, and that's how they infect you. Now, the reason that there's preference sites for ERVs is because ERVs are viruses, and if you really believe that they're not front-loaded and you believe that they're due to viral infection, if that's really what you're going with,
how many
then I got to
preference
ask
sites
you, why
are
are there so few between chimps and humans?
How many preference sites are there?
How many viruses
How
are
many
there?
preference
I just
sites
explained it to you. The virus is a piece of RNA or DNA floating around, and the way that it infects a host is that it has to match the host's DNA or RNA. That's why some viruses can only infect some species, and some viruses are interspecies viruses.
How many preference sites
all species are retroviruses.
Huh?
And not all viruses are retroviruses, and the fact that we can identify
retroviruses
right. shows that that's the thing that happens. Like, some viruses do go to the nucleus, insert themselves, and start making changes. We can observe that in laboratories, so we know how that works.
Mm-hmm.
That's why we draw the conclusions about the endogenous ones.
Yeah, we know how viruses infect the genome, and all viruses have matching sections of code, okay? Like, if you understand virus theory, this is all theory that we're talking about because it's virus theory, okay? But the theory is that viruses, okay, it's not a theory that they're pieces of DNA and RNA, but it's all theory of how they infect the host.
I would like to read from Seascience's paper now the conclusions that they made from this. Genetic studies indicated...
This isn't...
No. I'd like to read from your paper that you sort of pointed me towards. Genetic studies indicated
what you're looking for is in the
chimpanzees
Q&A
are the
part
most
of the paper.
closely related pair for most of the genome. However, so some fraction of the genome, they are not. Such data is consistent with the model in which alleles segregated differently upon the three eventual lineages. Some alleles that were polymorphic in the common ancestor of the gorilla, chimpanzees, and humans became fixed within the common ancestor of humans and chimpanzees before the latter two lineages separated. Thank you for that paper, Seascience. Thank you.
Hey, you're welcome. I hope that you read the Q&A part of it, because that's the section that actually includes the part
Oh
about
no,
puppy sex.
I'm reading the paper
Here's
that
the
they
other
misrepresented,
thing.
not
Here's the
the
other
article.
thing.
I go to papers, not
And-
sort of your silly sites.
And all right, we have a new person to join the panel. Seascience, you might be getting back up. We'll find out.
Dun dun
Dun
dun.
dun.
Though we are definitely only going for 30 to 40 more minutes, because we're going to be to hour 4 at that time. But I'm looking forward to the back and forth. We are skeptic and ranting on why evolution is not true. Whoa. Donny, what is up, SF2?
Hey,
we
man,
are skeptic and
We get an
ranting
ERV expert, I'm happy.
on why evolution is not true. It is wonderful to have
But before
you on.
Donny, and I hope he's pleased with me, I have one last question for Mark Reid.
Oh,
Amy,
no.
Amy, just one
I'm
last.
in the middle.
One last question. Why do
Let
some
the man
animals
make his
share
intro,
ERVs
dude.
with humans? Now, hang on, Ember. Why do some animals share ERVs with humans, like mice, and humans share ERVs that chimps and humans don't? Would that confuse you? Or say, like, if we were to find an ERV within a gorilla that chimps don't have that humans do, would that confuse the hell out of you? Back to you, Donny.
It doesn't. I just read out the paper that explained it, so I don't know what to tell you.
And all right, we are skeptic and ranting on why evolution is not true. Welcome on board, Donny, and what are your thoughts about anything we've been talking about tonight?
Well, Amy and James, firstly, it is a privilege to be here for your awesome late night open mic. We have that in common. I enjoy my late night streams and open mics. Secondly, Mark, my good man, you have better endurance than me. And so I must confess, typically after 4 or 5 hours, I am discombobulated. But I just got done relaxing, watching a movie with the wife, and she fell asleep. And so I decided to turn into YouTube and see what's going on.
Okay.
And I was like, you know what? ERVs, Mark Reid on Amy's channel. I can't resist.
They did
So
offer you
good
couldn't
to be here.
refuse. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And Amy
Welcome
and James,
aboard.
we're going to be doing 2v1 plus open mic night coming up. So that should be fun. Mark will be there for the open mic part for sure.
Oh, probably. Yeah.
Oh, I'm ready, and my body is willing for Dr. Dino.
So, Mark, nice hat. I'm jealous.
Oh,
Firstly,
Yeah, I'm 1,000% jealous. I love awesome hats, and that is way more awesome than any hat I have.
I had to put the cell phone closer to my face to see if that was one of those like Snapchat or Facebook. What do they call those things when you can
Like a filter?
Yeah, filter. There, you can tell it's late. I couldn't think of the word. Or legit, and it's legit, so that's impressive. So anyways, it's good to be here, and yeah, I think there were some points and questions that were advanced by Mark that I think are good. They're legit, and I think as creationists we need to have good answers to those arguments and challenges. Mark, if it's okay with you, since I did just join, I did catch bits and pieces of the discussion, but can you take some time to reiterate why you believe endogenous
Oh, I
retroviruses
softened them
are?
up for you, SFT.
Well,
Mark, I'm sorry.
I know you guys are best buds. Yeah, so Mark, take your time. Maybe
Yeah.
just go over briefly.
So
why
I
you
went through
believe
the
ERVs.
basic ERV sequence of integrase, making a cut, causing long terminal repeats in the edges of it, inserting the or transcribing that sequence into the DNA of the host. Essentially, it is selected at random around the outside of selection areas of where it integrates to. Seascience was suggesting, or at least it sounded to me like he was suggesting, that it was specific places where it does have preference for places, but really it's the closest entry point to the genome on the outside of the cell it is infecting. I also explained that it cannot be the case that he suggested they were infecting the body like normal retroviruses do. I said that cannot happen because it has to infect the germline. He was trying to say, why do we only share 205 with chimpanzees? My response was 205. We shouldn't even share one if they are retroviral insertions, because the chances of them being in the same place is so minuscule. 205, we shouldn't even see that. He brought up that they were front-loaded in some way. I don't see any reason to believe they are front-loaded. They have all the hallmarks of retroviruses, and I see no evidence to suggest that is the case. I think that's about it. I'm trying to, like, sum up a large discussion into a very short amount of time.
Okay, Mark, I appreciate
was that okay, Seascience? Did I misrepresent you in any way? I wouldn't like to misrepresent people.
Yeah, and well, I think I've got.
Oh, I wasn't really listening, brother. I don't know. I was
Okay,
kind
well,
of chatting with
let's
you.
just say it is then. If I misrepresented, that's fine. Sure.
Well, did you ever answer the question of why ERVs?
Well, Mark, let me just go back
so
and forth with Mark. Well, there's two Marks, I guess. So, Seascience, let me go back and forth with Mark on this topic in order to avoid too many rabbit trails there. So, essentially,
Go for
you would argue, Mark, that the 205 full ERVs, as you pointed out, LTR, GAG, POL, and ENV components of the ERV. Actually, Amy, if you don't mind, I've got a diagram of what Mark's talking about with the ERV on screen. If you could, I think that'd be helpful for all of us. Okay.
Ooh, infinite regress.
There we go. So yeah, that brief moment. So as Mark was saying, we've got your classic ERV. We got different classes of retrotransposons or retro elements. ERV is one of them. And so you can see the structure, as Mark has pointed out, LTR, GAG, POL, and ENV or envelope protein. So this same structure is what we see with retroviruses as well. Exogenous retroviruses like your HIV, which would infect from outside. Endogenous meaning occurs from within. And so that sequence similarity would suggest to the evolutionist that these were ultimately derived from ancient exogenous retroviral infection. So, Mark, you would say those 205 plus you've got thousands of solo LTRs, right? That basically lack your key endogenous retroviral components.
But
those being shared between.
I just want to point out really quickly, and exogenous from the outside would infect in different places, and they have done tests to show that that is the case.
Well, I agree that external viral infection occurs for sure. And we find nested hierarchical patterns in the distribution. I do remember you pointing out that we share more with the chimpanzee than we do with the gorilla or the orangutan or the old world, new world monkeys. So I think the question is, if these are actually viral infections, how can a creationist explain independently 200 plus endogenous retroviral elements integrating into the exact same genetic loci in humans and chimps if they were not inherited from a common ancestor, basically?
Yes.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so the question that I typically ask, and it's definitely not new to you, Mark, is are these really the ancient remnants of past viral infections, or are they mostly created units of DNA function? If they are created units of DNA function, at least the fixed ones, okay, we can get into that, then the reason why they are shared, let's say the 205 plus the thousands of solo LTRs that we find, is for common design reasons. It's the same reason all modes of transportation share an engine in common, if they are created units of DNA function. Now, I would argue that we do have examples of true endogenous retroviruses, but those would generally occur at a low frequency. For example, I typically cite a paper where they examine ERVs, human endogenous retroviruses, and there's a subset of the human population that has a very specific ERV. And so I think we can safely conclude, yeah, that is the result of a true endogenization event, where basically an exogenous retrovirus integrated into the germ cell lines egg or sperm, and then manage to be passed on to become endogenous. So I do believe that that happens, but I would argue the majority are reflective of initial design. And one reason I'd like you to speak to this, Mark, and take as long as you need. One reason why your endogenous retroviruses share that sequence similarity with exogenous retroviruses, the GAG, the POL, the ENV, the LTRs, is because amazingly, one of their functional roles involves tumor suppression. And they do this through viral mimicry. And so basically, transcribed ERVs, they give the cell the appearance of being invaded by an external and harmful retrovirus. And as a result, by the way, this is stimulated by the p53 protein, the guardian of the genome, basically. The immune system targets that cell with more destruction, which as a result destroys those tumor cells. But this functional role can only be carried out if the endogenous retrovirus looks like the exogenous retrovirus that it's mimicking. And so it requires the GAG, the POL, the ENV, and the LTRs to perform that functional role. Go ahead, Mark.
Okay. So when you say sort of, so I did get the exogenous, and I really want people to understand this. If an exogenous retrovirus, and that's one coming from outside that hasn't been infected the germline and become endogenous or a part of the normal genetic makeup, if that infects, it will be in all different parts of the genome in different cells. It will be in different parts. So I just want to make that clear. What is your mechanism? And I want to ask this sort of hypothetically. So if you've got these endogenous retroviruses, they have the same pattern as what you call the ones originating from a created design kind of thing. It seems to me there is no way to tell the difference between them. And I'll point you to, I think we've discussed it before, Phoenix Rising, where they basically got an endogenous retroviral sequence that was inert, and they reactivated it, turning it back into the virus. Because yes, some of these have been co-opted to be beneficial. I can get papers showing that they've been co-opted, but some of them do nothing at all, or there are retroviral elements which are devastating should a mutation return them to working order. So it seems to me like, Donny, you don't have any way to distinguish between the three, except for, and I'm sorry to say this, what's sort of convenient for what you're saying, that the ones that do something good are not the retroviruses, they're created, and the ones that do something bad are the retroviruses. And, you know, you would understand why that wouldn't be a good solution to determine what has been created and what hasn't been created. You mentioned the p53 viral element, and I agree. If that's knocked out, it's absolute devastation, because it does do exactly what you say it does. And I'm not sure if you're saying sort of it mimics the ability of retroviruses to suppress other infections. I think it's described by scientists as just that is what it's doing because it is a retroviral element. And we've seen retroviruses do that before. That is what they do. In order to stop other things from infecting the host they have infected, they suppress other infections. So I don't know why we'd sort of appeal to a mimicry of the behavior when they might just be doing that behavior. And sort of you also have these other retroviral elements that, or, you know, if they are created things like you say, that we do knockout tests and knock out the genes and they do absolutely nothing, and we know they do nothing. Like Phoenix Rising, which we can turn back into a virus. But my question to you is, what is your methodology for determining the difference between viral elements and these created segments, and how do you put that into a scientific lab to determine what's what?
Excellent question, Mark. I appreciate you asking it. So you brought up a few points, and I wrote them down as quickly as I could. And so your main question is, how can we tell the difference between a created ERV, a created unit of DNA function, and a true endogenous retrovirus, something that's actually the result of, and you, Mark, you explained it well, that essentially when an exogenous retrovirus infiltrates and infects a reproductive cell, if it's passed on, that the progeny has that viral DNA in every single one of its cells. Now, how can we tell the difference between that which is created and that which might be the result of a true infection that became endogenized? I would argue it comes down to fixed versus unfixed ERVs. And so the majority of your ERVs that we discuss, such as the 205 full ERV components, as in the ERVs that are not just solo LTRs, but actually have your GAG, your pole, your ENV components, okay, your LTRs on either side. Those are fixed. What that means is they are stuck in place. Every single human being has them, and all your chimpanzees have them, which is why the evolutionists would even argue we share them in the first place, right? They'd have to be fixed. Then you have what's called unfixed ERVs. What that means is only a subpopulation has them. Okay, so in humans, those HERVs, human endogenous retroviruses, there would only be a small frequency of people that have them, maybe 5%. There might be a higher frequency where 80% or 90% of people have them, but not 100%. And so, how I would determine that which is fixed versus, or that which is created versus not created, is whether or not they're fixed. So if every single human being has them, and the chimpanzees share in similar genetic loci those ERVs, then I would say that those are most likely created. If they're unfixed and only occur in a low frequency, let's say within humans or chimpanzees, they are the result of a true infection. Before you respond, I do want to make a point about the Phoenix virus experiment, because that's important and that's a good point. But the debate is not about whether or not internal endogenous retroviral elements can produce viruses, harmful viruses that can basically jump from one species to the next. Because the escapee hypothesis that we hold to, that argues retroviruses originated from within the genomes of their hosts, right? Because the question that I like to ask is, what came first, the host or the retrovirus? Because the retrovirus requires a host to replicate. And even many in the conventional literature, they would hold to what I'm saying, the escapee hypothesis, that basically your retroviruses came from within the genomes of their hosts, and then they've crossed species and have become infectious. So that's an agnostic line of evidence, because all the Phoenix virus experiment did was resurrected a dead virus from a host genome. Well, we already agree as creationists, at least I do, because I hold to the escapee hypothesis, that that can happen. And so it's going to come down to your fixed versus unfixed ERVs, but also function. So I would predict that those fixed ERVs are going to have functional roles in the immune system, cell stress responses, determining cell types, gene regulation, gene expression, placental development, for example. And so that's the best way I'd answer your question, Mark. Go ahead, speak to that.
Yeah, I don't really see fixed versus unfixed as being particularly definitive on how to determine that these have some sort of function or not, because we've done knockout tests on fixed retroviral sequences and they don't do anything. The problem comes that it's sort of a post hoc kind of rationalization that you can say, hey, the fixed ones are there. I mean, we would agree that the fixed ones wouldn't be that detrimental, because they have to be, but we know that if the fixed ones mutate, they can be cause genetic problems. Would you agree to that?
Good question, Mark. I don't believe it's post hoc because, well, firstly, to answer your question, yeah, there are a lot of endogenous retroviruses that can be hit with deleterious mutations, and that could lead to multiple sclerosis, for example. There's a lot of work done, right?
Yeah.
Different, all types of diseases, right? That is essentially degeneration of a unit of DNA that wasn't originally involved in those kinds of diseases. But mutations can take a functioning, healthy DNA unit and alter it in a way where it causes disease. So I don't think that's an issue. But the nature of the fixed ERVs it's not that every single ERV is going to have a role that is detrimental to the organism, right? So, for example, we've learned that mutations are not necessarily completely random. A lot of them are non-random because mutations oftentimes will target a spot of the genome that might not be involved in something dealing with the heart or something dealing with embryological development. Because if a mutation hits a specific section of the DNA involved with something as critical as the heart, well, the organism's going to die. And so typically those parts of the genome will be preserved, but mutations will more frequently hit regions of the genome that might involve redundant areas or
Sure.
even areas involving the immune system, because we have a lot of DNA elements that assist in the immune system. And so we could probably afford a few DNA elements being hit with mutations, but we still got a lot of backup code essentially. Does that make sense to you, Mark?
Yeah,
And
it
does
kind
that
of,
answer
though,
your
it
question?
seems like you are designating these retro, or what appears to be retroviral elements, or the created sequences that you're talking about, by their usefulness and functionality rather than by any kind of physical evaluation of them at all.
Well, I would argue if they're fixed, meaning every single human being has them, but they're also involved in some kind of function like tumor suppression, which involves viral mimicry. I mean, the endogenous retrovirus has to look like the virus that it is mimicking in order to perform its job. Like if an FBI agent was trying to infiltrate the mob, right? He has to look the part. He's got to look like the mob. You know, we've all seen those movies, The Departed, Goodfellas, so on and so forth. But if he showed up with his FBI badge and in his uniform, well, he's not going to get too far. And so
I'd
the
go with the
ERVs,
Terminator on that one, actually.
yeah,
Like,
Yeah.
you're a robot, you're here to kill everybody, you wrap yourself in the flesh so that none of the detectors can find you.
yeah, I mean, you could say that a robot like Terminator has to look the part, so it's not, caught in its disguise. So a lot of these ERVs, they function in fighting off viral infections. They function in the immune system, and they do so by looking like the enemy, by looking like that which they fight. And so yeah, if these are fixed, all 205, let's say, that all humans have, and they share with the chimpanzee, I would argue that those are the created units of DNA function. But there are many ERVs that occur at a low frequency. They're unfixed, meaning not every single person has them. And so that would tell me, okay, they're probably damaging somehow. They're most likely disease causing, right? Maybe they result in the multiple sclerosis or types of autoimmune diseases. They're probably not functional, especially in something like embryological development. And that's partly why they're unfixed, because they were the result of an exogenous retroviral infection in the past. It became endogenized, but it only spread through a small part of the population. And we do have examples of that in humans. Does that make sense, Mark?
Not really. I just don't know why, when creating a sort of a sequence in order to help us with something, that you would basically make it exactly like a retroviral sequence, including the LTRs, and then make some of them functional and then some of them non-functional, and sort of not activate them at all. That doesn't seem that the more parsimonious explanation does to be that they're simply the ancient remains of viruses, some of which have been co-opted, as we know that any part of the genome can mutate and have these become beneficial, especially in disease prevention, because of the way that retroviruses behave, even retroviruses like AIDS that are currently basically preventing infection because they want the host. And have been a result of common ancestry. I don't see why something would design it in such a way that there is so much, as through knockout tests, so much neutral area, and that the ones that do something useful, for all intents and purposes, seem to be the ancient remnants of those retroviruses with exactly the same structure, exactly the same marks left by their integration, and sort of say, well, that seems like the most probable explanation. To me, it seems like a very far-fetched explanation.
I appreciate those points. I would argue that the most parsimonious explanation is the created units of DNA function model, precisely because I've not seen a convincing response. And I've got a specific paper in front of me. Amy could either screen share or not a big deal, but in case people wanted to see it. And it's a paper from 2021. It's called Switching Sides, How Endogenous Retroviruses Protect Us from Viral Infection. It goes into, the paper is a fascinating read. It goes into each component, the ENV, the GAG, the POL, okay? It goes into the details on how each component of the ERV is actually necessary and required for the ERV's function in fighting off infections. And so I see it as front-loaded antiviral programs. And that screams of good design. I mean, our computers would crash after a long time without any kind of antiviral protection built in or added in as well. But these functional roles, one specifically being the role in embryological development. There's several papers that essentially point out if we didn't have these endogenous retroviruses in our systems, mammals wouldn't exist, as in we literally require them to exist. And so my challenge to the evolutionist is show me where an exogenous retrovirus has infected, like HIV, that's an exogenous retrovirus. Where have they ever infected in the right way, which is in the reproductive cells, has been passed on, and then through mutations over time, basically the harmful parts of the endogenous retrovirus are destroyed. And then through either co-option or beneficial mutation accumulation, that ERV evolves something that is necessary for placental or embryological development. You know, my challenge is to the evolutionist is to show us how that's possible, how that's happened in the past, and if we've observed it today, either in nature or the lab. Go ahead.
Yeah, so this switching sides, it absolutely disagrees with you and says that they were co-opted retroviruses, and they've outlined all of the viral infection and simulation that they've done to show that they were retroviruses. So this paper that you've said, and I've actually got it in my list of papers to support the endogenous retroviral evolution model, because it 100% supports it. You know, so the sort of they've been identified as pre-existing viral matter. So this paper doesn't help your case, because they've explained how it has been co-opted. So yeah, this whole idea that they have been included somehow, I don't know how this paper helps you. So what was the other thing you asked? You asked for where a retroviral element has infected humans and what? Sorry, I do apologize. I was kind of lost in the paper.
No, that's okay. I'll reiterate it, and then I'll respond to your point thereafter when you're done with your arguments. Essentially, I pointed out how without endogenous retroviruses, the placenta being critical to pregnancy and embryological development.
Yeah.
Right. Have we seen that kind of?
So it's not critical to pregnancy. It's not, because we've got animals that are very similar to mammals, yet they give birth without sort of a placenta. So we've got the marsupials that do not have that retroviral element in it, that do use a pouch system and an embryonic sac to instead they don't have a placenta. And that's kangaroos and koalas, and very similar animals to the ones we have today. We have the monotremes, which don't even have a sac, and they're further on. They don't have the retroviral elements that produce live young. They have a shell system still, because that did not split off. So when you say it's necessary for pregnancy, in mammals, yes, because we all have split off with that retroviral element, but there are other animals without that retroviral element. And they're very similar to mammals, but they split off just before that developed. So I can show that that's completely incorrect. We do not need that retrovirus to become pregnant, only to become pregnant as placental mammals, and that's all.
Okay, I appreciate those points. Those are good points for me to address. And so I'll do them in turn. So first, you pointed out how the paper claims that these functional roles involved in the immune system were co-opted, but they don't actually provide any evidence for this co-option. They don't show us how or when or where a pre-existing endogenous retrovirus gained a novel function in the immune system, or determining cell types, or in a tumor suppression with their role in viral mimicry. They're basically just asserting it without evidence. So assertions without evidence isn't a real good line of argumentation. So you need to see or provide evidence for these novel functions coming about. But I find it funny because the evolutionists oftentimes ask, well, why do the ERVs look like retroviruses? Why are they built the same way? Why do they have the LTRs, the GAG, the POL, the ENV? And it's like, we point out as informed creationists, well, they require their sequence similarity to retroviruses to literally carry out their various functional roles. But it's not good enough. And it makes me wonder if the evolutionist really is looking for an answer, because that is an answer. They require those similarities in order to basically do their job. And so the next point you made was, and I do mean this in the nicest way possible, but I feel like you completely dodged it, Mark, because again, you didn't show us anywhere or provide any technical paper that has actually demonstrated an exogenous retrovirus infecting in the reproductive cell lines, whether egg or sperm, being passed on, mutations then wipe away over time, because this is in theory how it's supposed to take place. Mutations wipe away the harmful aspects of the endogenous retrovirus, and then eventually through co-option or beneficial mutation accumulation, it evolves the ability to function in embryological development. I don't want evolutionary philosophy. I want to actually see in real time, empirically, how this is possible. You pointed to different modes of reproduction. Animals without a placenta, some mammals with a placenta. Okay, that's not telling us how the endogenous retroviruses evolved the ability to function in the placenta. Yeah, we have a variety of designs in the biological world. I mean, just look at engines and modes of transportation. You've got a diesel, you can get an electric car, you can get a regular engine, you can get a hybrid. Okay, yeah, there's a diversity in engines, but just saying that, well, a diesel engine exists, and so that means, an electric car or a hybrid car, it's possible to not have a diesel or something like that. No, you're not telling us how the placental development came about. Yes, we see variation in the biological world. It's not really a surprise, but I want to see how an endogenous retroviral element can actually go from something that's non-functioning to something functioning in embryological development. And that is my challenge. Go ahead.
Okay, so I want to share my screen. I put the articles in here. So the problem here is that it's not claiming anything. That's its conclusion. So I think sort of saying, well, it claims this is a bit misleading, to be honest with you, because it's the conclusions of the paper that you're citing, Donny. So if your paper doesn't come to the conclusions that you want, change what paper you're referencing. This is a paper that is in their citations, I might add, so you probably should have backtracked the citations, that the HIV-1 infection leads to increased transcription of human endogenous retrovirus, HERVK, proviruses in vivo, but not to increased viron production. So it was not replicating, yet it protected against proviruses. There's another one that I have that they also referenced. So this is the reference they provided because they're not just sort of saying this out of the blue, but in that paper, they will make citations to the papers that they're building off. And that's what you've got to go see. Because they will cite these papers saying, hey, we know that they are co-opted from these papers, and that is what's providing us the thing. I've shared the other one. Anyway, this is TRIM28 mediates primer binding site-targeted silencing of marine leukemia virus in embryonic cells. So that's one affecting, as you asked for, straight from the
Can
embryo.
you share your screen, Mark?
I thought I was. Sorry, I may not have been. Yeah.
No worries. I think Amy or James from your end. You
It
might
never
have
came up.
Yeah,
on
I
the-
put them in the chat as well. So if you're doing the
Okay.
a reference, they're in the
Oh,
chat
yeah,
as well.
I see him. Okay, I pulled them up. Keep going, Mark. Apologies.
Yeah. So when you're looking for like sort of we've got to know the exact mechanisms, exactly how this occurred in placental development, we might not be able to show that. I mean, we can show the endogenous retrovirus that's led up to placental development, and you know we've got tons of papers on them that you know, it was a retroviral element that was co-opted in order to provide this thing. But you're sort of saying, hey, I want to see the virus before it was co-opted. And I'm not sure we can show you that. Too much water under the bridge. It's been changed way too much. It's been mutated way too much. So I think that's an unrealistic expectation. But what we can show is that these viral elements do infect things and they do get co-opted. So there's no reason to think that it was the creation of some design. Instead, it is what it appears to be, which is the co-option of a retroviral element that has been inserted at the germline.
I appreciate those responses and papers, Mark.
Yeah, well,
I do
they're
hear
just-
a lot of background noise or echo coming.
Something's
James, I wonder if
clicking.
it's from you. Because when
Yeah, everyone else is muted, yeah.
Amy, if you could, or James, share my screen as well, because I did pull up those papers that Mark has cited. And so I see that, Mark, as an admittance, and I appreciate it. An admittance into the fact that, yes, these co-option events, the evolution of these novel functions, by the way, that the conventional literature admits, if we didn't have these elements with these functions, we literally wouldn't exist. And so when an evolutionist asks an intelligent design proponent, why do we share these elements with the chimpanzee? I feel like they're not necessarily steel manning the position or understanding the design hypothesis. Because if we have DNA elements that are literally necessary for biological life to exist and function in the first place, that's like asking, why do GMs and Chryslers share engines? I mean, you can get rid of a lot of parts on a car and the car is still going to function and run. But the second you get rid of the engine, chances are that car is not going to go too far. So many ERVs function in cell processes that if they're hit with a mutation, it's not necessarily going to kill the organism. There's a lot of backup code, a lot of backup genetic elements. But an element like some of these ERVs that function in the placenta, yeah, that's necessary in order for life to survive or exist in the first place. And so I've got a whole presentation on that paper, the original paper here that we're talking about, switching sides. And as you can see here, they go into how the LTRs act as enhancers and increase antiviral gene expression. They go into the functions of the ENV proteins and how they're associated with these immune system related functions, the GAG proteins as well, right here, besides ENV, endogenous retrovirus GAG proteins can also restrict retroviral replication. And so everything about the ERV is necessary, is my point. And so it's no surprise that they look like the retroviruses that they're protecting us against. So here's the papers from Mark. And I'm just looking over
And
them.
so,
Mark.
if you don't mind, Donny, you can actually take as long as you want to finish up your point. But then after you have a point and Mark does, I'm actually going to hand it back over to you, Donny, for your for everyone's outros. But you sounded like you were just finishing up a point. Take all the time you need.
I appreciate that, Amy. You're a great host, and you're a very fair moderator. So that is much appreciated. And Mark is always an excellent interlocutor. Seriously, when Mark joins the open mics, I think to myself, here we go. This is going to be a good show, because that's the whole reason why we do these discussions, is so we can have some interesting back and forth.
Exactly.
and that goes for passionate back and forth.
I'm here to
So I'm going to
entertain,
read these
apparently.
papers, of course, on my own. But I would just appreciate if Mark showed me where in these papers we are seeing empirical or real-time evidence or even a direct answer to my challenge.
Well,
You know,
your,
I like
your
here it
challenge
says
was
recent.
specifically
Go ahead.
about placental.
Sorry, these papers showing how the immune system roles came about?
No, you said that like you wanted evidence for placental, the retrovirus that sort of allowed us to have placental development.
Well, you can go down the line. ERVs function in determining cell types. They function in cell stress responses. Gene expression, that's basically the process by which a gene gets turned on in a cell to make RNA and proteins. And guess what? ERVs are involved in that. Gene regulation, the regulation of the process known as gene expression. So any of these functional roles, you know, show me how any endogenous retrovirus evolved this functional role. And if an evolutionist can't show me that, it's evolutionary philosophy. It's not actually science. It's just an assertion and a claim. And these papers can conclude all sorts of things. But if those conclusions are not backed by empirical scientific data, then it's a conclusion not based on science. It's mostly based on story.
Well, science is inference, and that's what we can infer from having these retroviral elements co-opted. So there's no reason to think they were created if they can be co-opted. And sort of the whole idea of, we wouldn't.
Where does it show them being co-opted?
Hold on a sec, Donny. The whole idea of we wouldn't exist, which is what you said, we would exist, we just wouldn't give birth by placental means. We would probably give birth by, monotremes, like we would lay eggs, or we would have a sac, an embryonic sac like kangaroos. The whole idea that you're sort of saying, hey, but we wouldn't exist. Yeah, not exactly as we are now, but that's sort of, there's no counterfactual to that. Because we did evolve this ability, you can't say, well, we wouldn't exist because we would. Because there are animals that do exist and give birth. And you said it again, that they're required for pregnancy. No, they're not required for pregnancy. And the fact that there are animals without these ERV sequences that do give birth, whether through embryonic sac or egg, shows that it is not essential for life, as you sort of. So you said directly, in order for life to survive, and that is not true, because there are. I'm not sure what you're typing out. Do you want to maybe? In order for life to survive, no, there's life forms without these ERV sequences as you go further and further back. And this is the nested hierarchy that we're talking about. The further away from us on the evolutionary tree you get, the less ERV sequences are shared between life forms. So you're saying it's essential to survive, but other things survive without them. We just may be more optimal because we have evolved, and these mutations have actually been beneficial. Again, you've quoted the paper Switching Sides. The entire point of Switching Sides is that once damaging and detrimental viruses can be co-opted to be beneficial, and that's exactly what they've pointed out. I've given examples where viruses are co-opted by mutation to be beneficial to their host, and those are the citations they use to show that it can happen. And as a product of inference, they have made this inference quite tentatively. I think that they're not exactly sort of saying, hey, we've figured it all out. But they've certainly said, hey, there is no reason to think these were created when they look like endogenous retroviruses, they act like endogenous retroviruses, but they have been co-opted, like we have seen time and time again, to be beneficial for the organism. Again, you mentioned that it's necessary. No, they're not necessary. Other life forms exist without these viruses. The whole thing, what it seems to me, is you're sort of saying, well, if it's beneficial, it was created. And there's no reason to think that whatsoever. So as you go further and further back, you've got to explain how, if it is so necessary, how life forms actually exist without these ERVs.
And Donny is going to be able to answer because he is going to get his outro. We all are going to get our outros. He was just the latest to join us, which means he's the first to go, and we're going in the opposite order we came in. We have been skeptic and ranting on why evolution is not true. And we are going to our outros. Woohoo! With that, we're going to hand it off to Donny. Thank you so much, SFT, for joining us tonight on Skeptic and Ranting. But we have very specifically have been talking about why evolution is not true. Dun, dun, dun. I want to thank you. What do you have got going on in the interwebs? And what are your final thoughts on the subject as a whole?
Appreciate it, Amy. This has been a lot of fun, and we definitely need to do more of this. I love discussing this topic, and I especially love discussing this topic with informed interlocutors. Makes it a lot more fun and engaging. And so my last points, based on what Mark said, to me, it's like saying, well, an electric car requires an electric engine to run properly. But it doesn't really require an electric engine to run properly because we've got cars that run on a diesel engine or a regular engine or hybrid or whatever. Well, what we see in the biological world are some creatures that reproduce or exist with a placenta and some that don't. So you can't point to the ones that don't and therefore, well, the placenta, in these mammals must have evolved. That's just an assertion. That's just evolutionary philosophy. We need supportive evidence for that. And that is still my challenge, that I feel like after years and years of engaging the topic of ERVs, we've yet to see this co-option that is often claimed. We've yet to see these pre-existing endogenous retroviruses going from non-functional to something functional in embryological development, functioning in the immune system, cell stress responses. Again, we talked about their role in tumor suppression. Literally, they could not carry out that role if they did not look like the enemy, if they did not have those sequence similarities to exogenous retroviruses. But this all comes down to, or back to, and here's the last thing I'll say, the bigger question, which is what came first, the retrovirus or the host? Because retroviruses require a host to replicate. And so with the Phoenix virus experiment that Mark talked about, it's agnostic, because I already agree that viruses can come from host genomes and can originate from pre-existing ERVs. And so if the escapee hypothesis is true, then we expect all of this data. So I appreciate, actually, last thing I'll say, nested hierarchies. Yes, if these are created units of DNA function, Mark pointed to nested hierarchies, then yes, it's no surprise that we would share more with the chimpanzee than we do with an orangutan or a dog or a fish, because we already share more in terms of morphology and anatomy and physiology with a chimpanzee than we do with something like a dog. And that's why it's all going to come back to that important question: are these really the ancient remnants of past viral infections, or are they created units of DNA function? How can we answer the question of what is created and what's not? I point back to fixed versus unfixed ERVs. And this was a lot of fun. Amy, I appreciate it. Thanks.
Woo-hoo. Thank you so very much, Donny. This was a lot of fun. Go check out SFT's channel. He does a lot of fantastic debates between theists and atheists. And keep on coming on. And we're going to go right down the list. I will also say, before I get to Ember, also just, that's right, Beamsy, glad to see that. We are, like I said, we like to talk etymology, we like to talk about epistemology, and sometimes we just like to talk about that ass. But we're going down to Ember. It's the type of high-level conversation ever.
Very sophisticated show.
Very
Hell yeah.
sophisticated. Where you like to sip wine. We have been skeptic and ranting on why evolution is not true. Dun dun dun. I hope you had a lot of fun. Where can people find you? What are your final thoughts?
Alrighty. Well, I'm usually over at my channel, better than ever. But I do pop around. You know, I was on Doc Dino's after show, obviously over here, and this weekend, uh, last I heard anyway, things get a little changey with MDD. But Mark and I are slated to do a 2v2 on Saturday, so that should be really cool. Final thoughts. My goodness, there was a lot of really rarefied data floating around today. It was really something. Personally, I can't say that I'm really convinced by the design argument because when you boil it all down, it comes down to a argument from incredulity. We can't prove it's not the result of a creator or intelligent designer, but we haven't seen any evidence of things like ERVs or exogenous retroviruses being created. You know what I mean? There's it comes down to the same chicken and egg problem with everything else. There is no evidence of anything poofing into existence. As far as the actual chicken and egg problem of whether the viruses evolve first or the host evolves first, what have you, that's answered by everything else we see in the natural world. The viruses, like any other kind of parasite, evolve along with their hosts. They mutate, we mutate, and the ones that mutate that can continue to infect us are the ones that get selected. The same thing with the ERVs. If a species encounters a lasting infection, if it provides a survival advantage, then that gets passed on. If it does not, then it's selected against. It's not random chance. Natural selection favors an advantage. That's all it cares about. There's no randomness to it whatsoever. But I think ultimately, at the end of the day, the real winner of this entire discussion is Mark's hat.
I warned him I had a hat.
I agree. Thank you so very much, Ember, for coming on and having great conversation. You should all check out Better Than Ember out there on the YouTubes. And lovely having you.
Thank you, thank you.
My chair keeps on getting co-opted by cats and dogs. I also have
I appreciate
big
that.
puppers. That was like I need to spend time right now.
Hello, Cooper.
Exactly. Cooper
Besieged
says
by
hi.
mammals.
But with that, we're gonna
Including
keep on.
You do give milk, by the way. They do make milk.
James, did you know?
They've got nipples.
I was gonna say, Rachel always looks at me and quotes that. She's like, "Did you know? Milk anything with nipples?" I'm like, "Thank you." And all right, we're going down. Once again,
It's my favorite
this
activity.
is the type of
Does Rachel hook up the pump
hard-hitting
to you to see if
theological
she can get
debates.
anything out of it?
Once again, those are called Tuesdays.
Just keep trying. Just keep trying. You'll maybe eventually you'll get some milk out of it.
Right next to Taco Tuesday. It's Milk Day. Mark, we have been skeptic and ranting on why evolution is
Aye, aye, Captain.
not true. Dun, dun, dun. Oh,
That's
my.
Probably a terrible salute. I do apologize to Beamsy and all concerned. Yeah, so I always find the sort of engine analysis really weird and strange because there's no fixed anything in engines. Like you can't fix anything because there is no propagation of those genes because engines don't have genes. It is a weird argument because when you're talking about mutations, you're talking about endogenization of retroviruses. There is no mechanism for passing DNA because there is no DNA. It's the weirdest thing. I don't understand it. I really don't. You cannot make an analogy between electric engines and human DNA. It's just not possible. I don't understand it. Nested hierarchy, yeah, and we see like not only do we see these things with benefits, we see also the same remnants of retroviral elements that do nothing whatsoever. So I think in order to even approach that they were created, you've got to explain why they were created to do absolutely nothing. And sort of we could do knockout tests and they have no functionality. So you've got to explain that somehow. I think that Ember was absolutely right. It's an argument from incredulity. I don't see how evolution could work. So we've got to come up with these ideas of, well, even though we see retroviral elements doing this, we see them inserting like this, we see them making the same patterns, we see them providing immune benefits like the HIV virus versus HMLT2, I think it is, or one of the HERVK viral elements. It provides sort of a resistance to it. That has to be a created element rather than everything we see in front of me. I think that has no reasonable evidence for it. Whereas the other one, we have a ton of evidence suggesting it's the case from all of the things that I've been through. So sort of asking for this specific case of placental development when saying, hey, life wouldn't be possible without this placental. No, it definitely would be possible. It just humans wouldn't be here. But that's sort of taking assuming the consequent kind of thing, or sort of, sort of saying, hey, if humans didn't have this thing, then we wouldn't be here. Therefore, it was created. No, that none of the evidence points that way. So, I mean, Donny can bring up studies. They do disagree with him. I agree with the authors of the studies that they have been co-opted. We've seen co-option happen. If you do check the citations of that paper and, check it out, yes, that's exactly what they're saying. So I'm going to go with the people who wrote the paper rather than, unfortunately, some people have a religious interest in it not being true. And that's unfortunate because they don't have a lot of evidence for that apart from their incredulity that it could happen naturally. And that isn't an argument. Thank you. Aye.
Thank you so much, Mark.
Aye, Captain.
Permission to come aboard.
Just thinking about something, and Beebsy's already out there.
Ahoy.
Which I will say, Mark, as
I am an able
employee,
seaman.
You are allowed to do this.
Hey, this is just my support of the community. Love you all. Hang in there. And, just so much love going out to you. I 100% support the LGBTQI community. Much love to everybody.
Woo-hoo, thank you so very much, Mark.
Is not an able seaman. She is a seaman guzzler.
Wow. I believe it.
Once again, I just like to think that I'm just going out there to... Man, I'm trying to think of...
You're doing the Lord's work, Amy.
I'm doing the Lord's work. I try to make the seamen stand tall. I don't even know. Nonetheless, it is 5 a.m. You can feel the gears. We're going to hand it over to our open mic headliner because there's only the people driving the plane after this.
There can only be one, Amy.
There can only be one. No, my favorite thing still is now we have had someone tell us that they have a sexual relationship with God.
Ugh.
We've now had someone tell us they've had a sexual relationship with Satan. I feel like we need to get these two people together and just, maybe we can end the war, James. This is how you end the forever war between God and Satan. Is like a really nice night with wine and cheese. Nonetheless, Seascience, we have been skeptic and ranting with why evolution is not true. That's right. I hope you had a good time. What you got going on out there, and what are your final thoughts?
I have had a good time, and I want to thank you for having me on, Amy and James. It was great getting to talk to Mark about some things. And he brought up quite a few points. He galloped a bit. It's true. He brought up 9 points in about 5 minutes. I only got to really talk about one. But since this is why evolution is not true, we'll start with the barriers for evolution, which was mutation. The nature of mutation is that mutation is a destructive biological force. It's proven to be what has caused every disorder that we know about and every form of cancer is because of mutation. It's not a creative force. and it doesn't have what it takes to create the many new forms or the many forms of life that we know now. Another thing that Mark brought up was a straw man of the argument that young Earth creationists bring up a lot of times, is that they believe that animals change into other animals over time. He's trying to claim that young Earth creationists are claiming that cows change directly into an antelope, and we want to see evidence of that. That's not what we're asking for. All we're asking for is some evidence that speciation in the animal kingdom even happens. Like an offspring that can no longer interbreed with its host species somewhere down the line. Just getting an example of that. So he's really misrepresenting the unearthed creationist argument, because they even go as far as to ask, like, just show us bacteria that has speciated or even turned into a multicellular organism, well, even into anything else other than the bacteria that it is. So it seems like evidence for speciation or the common ancestry of all life is lacking at best. There's a lot of barriers against it. He brought up ERVs. We showed that ERVs have reasons for preference sites. Okay, there's reasons that they're found within multiple species in the same places. That'd be because of the nature of viral infection. It only infects where it can, and that's where it matches the genome of the host that it's infecting. So there is a reason for these preference sites. If he really believes that it wasn't front-loaded from the beginning, because ERVs seem to be pretty functional. If he believes that they were viruses that infected the genome sometime in the distant past, I asked him, why are mice and humans sharing ERVs that chimps and humans do not? And he had no answer to that question. And he had no answer to why there's so few ERVs between chimpanzees and humans. He tried saying it's because they have to infect the gamete. Well, any mutation that's passed on to the next generation is something that affects the gamete. It has to. So that's basics of basics of biology there. So I mean, everyone understands that. The fact is, there's only a handful of like ERVs between chimps and humans. So why are there tens of thousands of ERVs that do not match between chimps and humans? Could the ERVs be because of a different reason, like the reason that there are like ERVs between humans and chimpanzees or humans and mice? Could it be because we share the same environment and the same viruses, and the viruses have preference sites that they adhere to when they infect the genome of the host? I think that could be why. I think it's a really good reason why. And I think there's plenty of reasons to question evolution and to not believe in evolution. One of them, again, being mainly that mutation is a destructive force. So I'm going to close with that. And also, wait, not yet. Also, the fact that his beneficial mutations are so few and far between, even if they happen to benefit the creature, he has to imagine billions of beneficial, almost directed seeming mutations, okay? Perfectly inserted to believe that all forms are a product of mutation. That is a huge leap in logic, and I'm not willing to accept it. If he's looking for confirmation that it's believable, he's not going to get it from me. That's what I'm going to close on.
Woohoo! Thank you so very much, Seascience.
Thank you, Doorknob Head, for your comment, too.
And send in love. And before I about to hand it off to the co-pilot that's going to help us land this plane, but I do want to send love. I saw Donny saying he's logging off, and we're sending that love as James
Good night, Donny.
and myself are going to be heading over to his channel, Standing for Truth, as we have our 2v1. I'm looking forward to that, James, just because unlike what I imagine as a normal 2v1, we already have our like kind of chemistry that, but maybe but maybe that's what he's saying, expect the unexpected.
Both of the atheists, and
both of them
with one whale dick tied behind my back.
James, do you know how big a whale's... And with that, we have been skeptic and ranting.
Dr. Hovind did a scientific paper on that. I'll refer you to the Journal of Ringling Brothers and Barnum and Bailey.
That's
That's
what
a
his
scientific
thesis
journal.
was, right?
Yeah. Hi, my name is Kent Hovind. Yeah. It's a
But
very
we
scholarly
have...
work, Amy. It was scholarly.
Oh, it is. And it's hands-on. That's what I like about it the most.
But yeah. Well, thanks everybody for staying with us this long. We got 18 people watching. You guys are amazing. We love you guys. And good conversation, good debate between Seascience, Mark, Ember, Donny. It was a lot of fun. Good conversation. That these are the kind of shows that we love. And we'll be back over the weekend. Stay tuned for more. We love you guys.
Woo-hoo. Thank you so very much, James. That's right. You should all be checking out. There's many fantastic channels, like we were just shouting out. We will be on Donny's channel, but you should also see Science. You still doing uploads on the old YouTube?
Oh yeah, from time to time.
I got a question for Seascience. Why is your uploads just the same like clip with nothing to it? Like there's no actual content in it. What's that all about?
Oh, you can see my uploads because you blocked me. I didn't think you could see me, man. The last couple were about.
This was ages ago. I noticed that it's just like
out.
non-content kind of thing. Are you just like doing minutes or something?
Hey,
trying to stay relevant.
Marky, do you mind if I make a video about our little talk?
Well, this is like a question. Like, what's that all about?
Well, I didn't hear it. What would you say?
Well, all of your videos, when I looked at it, were like just the same clips with nothing in them, exactly the same length, with just some music and like clips, and didn't have any actual content in them. Like, what's that all about?
Yeah, I don't even know what you mean. What are you talking about?
Oh, that sounded sincere. Sure.
Do my clips not work when you click them? Maybe you should unblock my channel, man. If you unblock my channel, maybe my clips will work.
Maybe you should unblock him. Go ahead.
You sounded really sincere.
The last clip I uploaded review was
you sounded really sincere, like you didn't know what I was talking about. That was good acting right there. That was really good acting.
All right.
Oscar to Seascience.
Seascience
like the Pentagon thing.
Very cheapy.
Go check out Standing for Truth.
Embarrassing.
Better Than Ember was doing streams either today or yesterday. I was just seeing you doing some amazing stuff. Mark Reid, Atheism. You should be checking him out. Dr. Dino was doing a stream with Dr. Dino.
Which one is the real Dr. Dino?
Dino. That's James.
The Dino debate.
That's right. You have to throw a knife in, and only one comes out. Anyway, we do the shilling. It has come time for the shilling. Here we go. If you'd like to be, that's right. If you'd like to be produced by someone who's related to someone who owns space lasers, then there you go. At Fiverr, I can help produce you and get your podcast started. We have many fantastic ways to help support the show, but I should actually say, thank you, Misfits, for joining us on this episode of Skeptic and Ranting. Why evolution is not true. Dun, dun, dun. Well, that's right. We watched a video from the channel Tomorrow's World, which sounds like a post-apocalyptic game, called Why Evolution is Not True. 4 major flaws exposed, which ended up being the same creatures. Yes, also indecent exposure. For a good time worth monkeying around. However, I do want to thank my co-host, James W., along with Vanna White. No, along with our guests, Seascience. Ding, ding. Yes, I hear the ding. No, I told I told the therapist I don't have yet that the dig, it can't really be real. It can't be physical. It has to be some sort of abstract. I'm just kidding. Go check
Strange
out.
ringing in my ears.
Exactly. No. Go check out Peter on Gonna Go For It and Aaron Ra, Atheist Jr., and on Randolph Richardson's stream with Taco. I need to talk with Taco. I want to have a show on politics. Not for anything probably productive.
Are you sure you want to go back to politics? Remember last debate on politics? That
Oh
was
my
a
God.
disaster. Not your fault, of course. You did.
No,
you
I
were
know.
beautiful as always, but that guy was a disaster.
It's okay.
You know what? I just want to also
Don't
add.
justify.
I challenged Praise for a debate on evolution on your channel, and he never got it. Just silence. Just
Really?
silence. Yeah, yeah.
Big Bad Mama, where are you? You
Ugh.
should be debating for.
I'll debate Big Bad Mama.
Praise.
I'll take them on. Take them on.
That's right. Come on. I don't know. I forget what his version of, not Trinitarian. There's like some debate that Praise is always trying to take in that the Christians are having. But it's always so abstract that the Muslims and Jews, it's like whether you're going to be accepted into heaven, and the Calvinists, all that fun stuff. How about our guests, our lovely guests, Seascience, Mark, woohoo, Amber, woohoo,
Yay.
and Donny, woohoo. Thank you, Seascience, Mark, Amber, and Donny, as well as the people in chat. What's up, chat? Our awesome mods who make this stream so great, including our lovely admin. He knows who he is. And lovely viewers like you who make this channel even possible. That really symbol was about like a second too late. That's okay. If you enjoyed the show, please like, because it goes into the algorithms and all that stuff. The YouTube gods, the only gods that exist. Thank you, TOS. Thank you. They're actually not that bad. It's the people who spread conspiracy theories and misinformation. I was trying to tell you that panties are trying to eat all of the dogs. Okay, whatever. They're gonna turn the frog. Okay. And follow on twitch.tv/Amy Newman Skeptic. Subscribe if you are on YouTube's. Oh my, what's up? We're doing it live. Hi, YouTube. And then hit that bell icon so you can join our live streams or see our premieres. But hi, chat. Or hey. And I'm not going to make, we're going to be good to this person I used to make fun of because they're trying to get better. Or hey, leave a comment once the video's done. It's almost hard not to do extra flair. You can also leave super thanks, which is like a super chat. In fact, thank you to all the people who did give us super chats. After the show, we'll be heading over to the Skeptic and Ranting Discord server, the link of which is in the description below, along with all of our fantastic channel members. In fact, you can get our evolving badge system. They say evolution doesn't exist, but our badge system evolves.
Says otherwise.
Sir, this conversation is being recorded.
What? And though the best way as well to help us make even more fantastic content and unlock some unique perks is by checking out our Patreon and becoming a supporter. Who doesn't like hearing me clickety clack At patreon.com.
They love it.
/
They
Amy
love
Newman.
every minute of it.
Games. It is who doesn't love a mechanical keyboard? Everyone. Oh my goodness. A $2 super chat at the very end from Doorknob Head.
Doorknob Head.
And that
Hey,
Thanks, Doorknob.
I solved my
Have to
mechanical
do.
keyboard issues. When's the last time you heard my clickety clack?
Did you?
Yeah.
Woo! Sending so
I'll
much
share the
love,
secret.
and
I'll
yeah.
share the captain's
You mean-
secret.
Okay. Or do you mean after stream?
After stream.
Oh, okay. Understandable.
But do like, subscribe,
My-
share, click the bell, and get
Margarita
more
keep
Amy
it
Newman goodness at all hours of the day when you least expect it. It's ambush
That's
Amy.
right.
Often when you least
Often.
expect it.
Right.
Often.
But it's a good way to get more experience before you hit your next Pokemon gym.
Sure.
Sending so much love, Doorknob Head. So much love to everybody in chat. I think that is all of the shilling. There can't be any more possible. No, that is it. We will see you all in the next episode of Skeptic Ball Z. Go check out Ember and Mark. And we love you all. Good night, everyone.
Night, everybody.
Yeah.
I want to give a big thank you to every single channel member who does so much to help me and the community have a fantastic time and keep producing more content. Thank you so much, everybody.